I don't remember the first word she ever said to me. That's the truth. But I remember the way she said this. You'll never understand. Not in anger, not even dismissively. More like she'd already lived a lifetime and I was just opening the first page of the manual. And for some reason, those words didn't push me away. They pulled me closer. It was a Tuesday, one of those days where the light outside felt stale, all gray window panes and weak sun leaking through the glass. I was halfway through stacking books in the shop where I worked. The bell above the door chimed, sharp enough to make me glance up. She walked in like she'd been there 100 times before, though I'd never seen her. Not hurried, not timid either. She moved with this quiet certainty, like she knew exactly which shelf she was headed for. Dark coat, hair tied up in that kind of loose knot that doesn't care whether it stays together or not. Mid-40s, maybe older, though she carried herself like someone who had already outgrown the need to be measured in numbers. I noticed her hands first. Not polished, not fragile. Strong, with faint lines that told their own history. She brushed them over the spines of books without really looking at the titles, like she was reading something invisible. I should have gone back to stacking, but I didn't. Can I help you find something? I asked. She gave me a look, the kind people give when they're deciding whether to bother answering at all. Then, softly, no. Not something you'd know. That should have ended it. Most customers don't want interference. But the way she said it, almost like it was personal, lodged itself under my skin. So I said the first reckless thing that came to mind. Then let me try. She laughed, but not cruelly. More like a reflex, caught between surprise and amusement. You won't understand, she said again, firmer this time. And I should have backed off, let her browse, kept my head down. But instead, those words kept circling in my head. Won't understand. Not can't. She disappeared into the corner aisle, leaving me with the sound of pages shifting and the creak of wooden shelves. I told myself to stop staring. But then it happened. She dropped a book, just slipped right through her hands, hitting the floor with a dull smack. I reached it at the same moment she bent to grab it. My hand brushed hers. Her skin was warm, unexpectedly warm, and she didn't pull away instantly. Just a second, maybe less, of her fingers against mine before she took the book back. Thanks, she murmured, eyes flicking up to meet mine. Brown, steady, with a weight in them I couldn't name. The room felt too quiet after that. When she finally brought the book to the counter, I noticed she hadn't even looked at the price. She slid it forward, eyes somewhere far away. I rang it up, tried not to fumble with the change. As she turned to leave, she paused. Not long, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. Then she said it, low, almost to herself. You'll never understand. And for reasons I still can't explain, I heard myself reply, quietly but certain. Then let me spend my life trying. She didn't answer, just walked out into the gray afternoon, coat brushing the doorframe, bell chiming behind her. But I've been stuck on that moment ever since. Her voice, her glance, the way her words weren't meant for me, yet somehow became mine. And I can't stop wondering if she knew I'd be thinking about it still. I didn't expect to see her again. But 2 weeks later, she was back in the shop. This time she didn't head straight for the shelves. She stood near the counter, scanning the board where we listed used books that needed sorting. I could help you with those, she said, nodding toward the stack. Her tone was casual, but her hands were already brushing against the pile like she was testing their weight. It caught me off guard. Customers didn't usually volunteer to do the heavy lifting. You don't have to, I said, half smiling. I know, she replied, almost too quickly. Then she added, softer. I just like the quiet here. That last part landed differently. It wasn't really about books. It was about escape. So I handed her a stack. And just like that, we were side by side, sliding paperbacks into alphabetized rows. Working next to her felt strange. Not tense exactly, but there was something charged in the silence. She didn't fill it with small talk, and I didn't push. Instead, I found myself noticing the small things. The way her sleeve kept slipping down her arm, and she pushed it back absent-mindedly. The faint laugh that escaped when a cover creaked open too stiffly. The shadows under her eyes that even makeup couldn't quite disguise. At one point, she paused mid-shelving, staring at a book like she'd forgotten why she was holding it. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She blinked, as if surfacing from somewhere far away. Then she gave this half smile. Not happy, not sad, just tired. Long week. Her voice was low, almost apologetic. I wanted to ask what had made it long. I wanted to know why her shoulders carried that kind of weight. But she straightened, set the book firmly in its place, and the moment closed again. We worked in silence after that. The only sounds were the soft thud of books finding shelves and the occasional scratch of cardboard against wood. And then, for just a second, our rhythm overlapped. We both reached for the same spot on the shelf. My hand hovered just above hers, not touching, but so close that the warmth of her skin brushed the air between us. She pulled back first, quick but graceful, covering it with a small laugh. "Guess I'm in your way." "You're not," I said, too quickly, too certain. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and searching, like she wanted to know what I meant but refused to ask. That look stayed with me longer than it should have. When she finally gathered her coat and thanked me for letting her help, she didn't meet my eyes. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder bag twice before heading to the door. And just before stepping out, she paused, hand resting on the frame, as if she'd forgotten something. She didn't turn around, didn't say a word. But I swear I could feel the weight of her hesitation from across the room. And when the door finally closed behind her, I realized I was holding my breath. It was raining the third time. Not the kind of rain that makes you want to run for cover, but the steady kind that soaks the city in gray. The shop had emptied out early, the last customer leaving with a muttered thanks and an umbrella snapping open. She stayed. She'd come in without one, damp shoulders, raindrops caught in the loose strands of her hair. She laughed softly at herself when she shook the water from her coat. "Storm caught me," she said. I offered her a towel from behind the counter. She hesitated before taking it, like accepting even a small kindness was a bigger deal than it should have been. We ended up sitting on the floor between two aisles, sorting through a box of unshelved titles. The storm rattled against the glass, a rhythm that made the quiet between us feel heavier. Somewhere between dusty hardcovers and torn paperbacks, the conversation shifted. "Do you ever feel?" she began, then stopped. She rubbed the spine of a book with her thumb, eyes on the floor. "Like the world just moved on without you." I looked at her, but she didn't look back. She said it like a secret, the kind you let slip only because the rain made the walls thinner. "Yeah," I admitted. My voice came out lower than I meant. "More often than I'd like." Her lips curved. Not a smile, not exactly. Something caught between relief and regret. For a moment, it felt like we were sitting closer than we were. That's when her phone buzzed. The sound was sharp in the quiet. She flinched before picking it up, the name flashing across the screen reflected in her eyes. She silenced it after a single ring, tucking the phone face down on the floor. "Someone important?" I asked carefully. She shook her head too fast. "Not anymore." Her hands were tighter around the towel now, twisting the fabric, and she didn't explain further. I wanted to ask. I didn't. Instead, we sat in the sound of the storm, both pretending to focus on the books. At some point, her hand brushed mine again as we reached for the same volume. Not clumsy this time. Slow, deliberate, almost like she hadn't decided whether to move it away. I didn't pull back either. The air between us thickened. My chest tightened with words I wasn't sure I was supposed to say, questions I wasn't supposed to ask, feelings I wasn't supposed to name. Her fingers lingered just long enough to make the silence unbearable. And then, she stood, sudden and graceful, brushing her hands against her coat as if nothing had happened. "It's late," she said. Her voice was steady, but she didn't meet my eyes. I stayed on the floor, looking up at her, torn between what I wanted to do and what I knew better than to try. When she reached for the door, I almost called her back. My throat worked with the start of her name, but the storm swallowed it before it left me. And just like that, she was gone again, leaving only the echo of what almost was. The storm had passed by the next time she came in. The air outside was clear, sharp with the smell of wet pavement. Inside, though, the shop was heavier than usual. Maybe it was just us. She didn't browse that day. She walked straight to the counter, leaned against it, and folded her arms like she'd already made up her mind about something. "You always here?" she asked. "Most days," I said. Her eyes searched my face, as if weighing whether that was good or bad. She didn't smile. "I shouldn't be," she muttered, almost to herself. "Here." She nodded. "This. With you. It's not what it looks like, but it isn't nothing either. And I don't know what to call it." Her voice was steady, but her shoulders weren't. They shifted like she was holding back a tremor. I leaned on the counter too, though not as close as I wanted. My words felt clumsy before they even left me. "Then what are we doing?" The question hung in the air, thick, heavier than any silence we'd sat through before. She looked at me, really looked, long enough that I had to drop my eyes to the floor, then back up again because I couldn't stand not seeing hers. "I don't know," she whispered. It wasn't defeat. It was confession. For a moment, neither of us moved. The hum of the fluorescent light above us was the only sound. "I keep telling myself not to come back," she said, finally. "But then I do. And every time, I walk out of here feeling seen. And it scares me." Her hands were flat against the counter now, pressing hard enough that her knuckles paled. I wanted to reach across and cover them with mine. I wanted to tell her she wasn't the only one. But the weight of her words pinned me in place. "You shouldn't be scared of that," I managed. She laughed, short, dry. "You're young. You think feeling something is simple. But it isn't. Not when you've lived long enough to know what it costs." That silence after her laugh burned hotter than any touch could. She stepped back then, like she'd said too much. But before she turned away, she looked at me once more. Her eyes were glassy but unbroken, carrying something she hadn't decided to let out. "I don't want to ruin this," she said quietly. Her words twisted inside me, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Like ruin was already waiting for us, and she was the only one brave enough to name it. And before I could think of an answer, she was walking toward the door again. The sound of it closing behind her felt final, but her last line clung to me, heavier than the storm ever had. "I don't want to ruin you." The shop was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet where every sound felt sharper. The scrape of a chair, the whisper of a page turning. She came in later than usual, almost at closing, carrying something in her hand that she kept hidden under her coat. "I won't stay long," she said. But she did. She set the object on the counter without looking at me. A photograph, edges bent, colors faded. The picture showed a man in his 20s, leaning against a car, smiling at whoever stood behind the camera. "He looks like you," she said, almost apologetic. I stared at the photo, then at her. "Who is he?" Her fingers traced the edge of the picture, careful, as if the paper itself might splinter. "Someone I knew a long time ago. Someone I lost before I knew what I was losing." Her voice trembled, the first time I'd ever heard it break. I didn't know what to say. My chest felt tight, like any word I picked would be the wrong one. "You remind me of him," she continued, softer now. "Not just how you look. The way you don't look away. The way you stay." The air between us shifted. Not romantic. Not yet. But something heavier. Like she'd opened a door she hadn't touched in years and wasn't sure she wanted open at all. I forced myself to ask, "What happened to him?" Her pause was long enough to count. "Accident," she whispered finally. And I never forgave myself for not answering his call that night. She pressed her lips together, and the silence that followed said more than the words ever could. I wanted to reach for her, to take the photograph and the pain out of her hands, but I stayed still. Maybe she didn't want comfort. Maybe she only wanted to be heard. "I'm sorry," I said. The words felt thin against her grief, but they were all I had. Her eyes lifted to mine. There was no anger in them, no defense, just a quiet recognition, like she knew I meant it, even if it wasn't enough. "You don't need to carry this," I added carefully. "Too late," she murmured. "I've carried it longer than you've been alive." That truth landed between us like a weight. Her age, my youth, the space neither of us could ignore anymore. She slid the photo back under her coat, as if tucking the past where it belonged. But the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Before leaving, she hesitated, the same way she always did. One step toward the door, one step back into silence. Then, almost too soft to hear, "You make it harder to keep him gone." And just like that, the ground shifted under me. It didn't happen with a kiss or a confession. It happened in the quiet, as everything between us always did. She came in on a night the shop was nearly empty, the clock already sliding past closing. I should have told her we were done for the day. Instead, I locked the door behind her. We didn't speak much. She wandered through the aisles while I stacked returns, both of us pretending to be busy. But the silence was different now. Not awkward, not tentative. Heavy, charged, like the air before a storm. When she finally sat down at the little table in the back, I joined her without asking. 2 chairs, too close together, a single lamp humming above us. For a while, neither of us said a word. Her hands rested on the table, fingers loosely knotted together. I stared at them longer than I should have. Strong, lined, worn, hands that had carried too much. "You shouldn't," she said suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. I knew what she meant. I didn't ask. "I know," I replied. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, waiting for me to contradict myself. I didn't, because it was true. We shouldn't. And yet here we were. Finally, she exhaled, long, weary, but also freeing. "I'm too old for this." I let the words sit. Then, or maybe I'm just old enough. That made her laugh, soft and broken, and she pressed her palm against her forehead like she could hide behind it. But she didn't turn away from me. She lowered her hand slowly, meeting my eyes again. And in that moment, the walls between us thinned in a way they hadn't before. "What are we doing?" she asked, the question she'd asked in a dozen different ways already. I leaned closer, elbows on the table. My answer came quiet, steady. "We're here." That's enough. The silence after that was louder than anything. She didn't move at first, just sat, watching me like she was deciding whether to step into something she couldn't step back from. Then, slowly, she reached across the table. Her fingers brushed mine, hesitant at first, then settled. It wasn't dramatic. No rush of heat or trembling declaration. Just her hand in mine, warm and real, like it belonged there all along. I didn't squeeze too hard. I didn't need to. We sat like that, hands joined, the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the lamp above us. The world outside might as well not have existed. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, unflinching. "Then let's not ruin this." And I knew, whatever this was, whatever it became, it was already ours. Quiet, fragile, inevitable. Looking back, I think what stayed with me wasn't a single moment. Not her first glance, not the storm, not even her hand finally resting in mine. It was everything in between. The silences that felt heavier than words. The pauses where I could hear her deciding whether to stay or leave. The way she never gave herself away all at once, only in fragments, like trust was something that had to be earned in tiny, careful pieces. And maybe that's what love really is. Not declarations, not fireworks, but the quiet decision to keep showing up for each other, even when it feels impossible. She once told me, "You'll never understand." And maybe she was right. Maybe I'll never fully grasp the weight she carried, the ghost she kept close, the years that shaped her before I ever walked into her life. But here's the truth I didn't know then. You don't need to understand someone to stand beside them. Sometimes, the effort, the trying, is what matters. And I have spent every day since proving that. I changed, too. Before her, I thought of love as something you stumbled into. Bright, simple, easy. She taught me it isn't. It's complicated. It's layered. Sometimes it's inconvenient, even unfair. But it's also patient. It waits through silence. It learns to read the weight behind a single glance. It forgives the things you can't quite say out loud. She made me older in the best way, not by years, but by understanding. I can't speak for her. She doesn't hand out answers like that. But sometimes, when we're sitting together in the quiet, a book open between us, her hand resting absent-mindedly near mine, I catch her looking at me with something softer than regret. And in those small, unremarkable moments, I know, whatever we are, it's real. Not a fairy tale. Not a mistake. Just two people who found each other in the cracks life left behind. So if you're listening, wondering what to take from this, maybe it's this. Don't wait for the perfect words or the perfect timing. Don't expect love to announce itself in lightning bolts. Sometimes it arrives in silences, in hesitations, in the person you can't quite explain but can't let go of either. That's what I learned. That's what she gave me. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. If you were me, would you have walked away or stayed? Tell me in the comments.